My phone buzzed on the table. The name on the screen sent a chill down my spine. Mark. The guy who, a month ago, smirked as he kicked me out of the office, calling my accent a business liability. I stared at the screen, the sunset bleeding through my window. Somewhere in that glass tower downtown, built on my code, chaos was unfolding. I knew it because I'd left them a key and a warning they laughed off. Now they were calling, but I wasn't rushing to answer. They needed to feel the deafening silence of their crash system first. Here's how it all went down. I used to lose myself in the clean lines of code where everything made sense. In my cubicle at Nexus Innovations, I'd sit with my headphones on, building systems that held the company together. My name's Kenji, and I was their invisible architect, crafting the backbone of their million-dollar projects. But outside my screen, the open plan office was a different world, a cold, fluorescent-lit aquarium where I felt eyes on me constantly. Mark, my project manager, had this way of leaning back in his chair during meetings, smirking when I spoke. Kenji, slow down, man, your accent's making my head hurt, he'd say, and the room would chuckle. Every time. Alex, another coder, never laughed out loud, but his smug grin said enough. He'd rewrite my reports, claiming they needed better phrasing, as if my words weren't clear. I'd spent years mastering algorithms, not English pronunciation, but to them, that was the same as being useless. Sarah, the junior dev, was different. She'd nod when I explained my work, her eyes flicking with understanding, but she'd stay quiet. Her shoulders hunched like she was bracing for a storm. I got it. She was scared of Mark, too. The office was all glass walls and fake transparency, but the real game was power. Mark loved his loud voice, his crisp suits, his leadership vibe. He'd interrupt my updates to talk sports or crack jokes about my exotic lunch, sushi I'd made myself. What's that smell, Kenji? Going full ninja on us, he'd say, and Alex would snicker. I'd just nod, my jaw tight, and go back to my code. It was my language, my proof I belonged. But no matter how flawless my work was, they only heard my accent, not my ideas. I was the guy who kept their systems running, but to them, I was just noise they didn't want to hear. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The way they ignored my input, the way Mark's eyes narrowed when I pushed back, it was a countdown. I kept building, kept believing my work would speak for itself. But in that office, silence wasn't strength. It was an invitation to be erased. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and dry erase markers. It was the final meeting before the Aegis project launch, and the air was thick with tension. I sat at the far end of the table, my laptop open, my notes ready. I'd found something, a flaw in the system, a logic bomb buried deep in the code. If exploited, it could crash everything. Client data, transactions, the whole network. My heart pounded as I raised my hand. I need to talk about a vulnerability, I started, my voice steady but careful. The room went quiet, but not the good kind. Mark leaned forward, his pen tapping the table like a metronome. Go on, Kenji, he said, his tone sharp, like he was daring me to waste his time. I explained the issue, how a specific type of attack could trigger the flaw, how it had rippled through the system like a wildfire. I kept it simple, no jargon, just facts. But halfway through, Mark cut me off. Kenji, hold up. You're losing us with that accent. If there's a problem, say it plain, or don't bother. The room snickered. Alex smirked, scribbling something in his notebook. Sarah stared at her hands, her face pale. I took a breath, my fingers gripping the edge of my laptop. It's a real risk, I said, slower this time, enunciating every word. If we don't fix it now, the whole system could go down. Mark rolled his eyes. You're overcomplicating things. We're on a deadline, not chasing ghosts. Anyone else got something useful? He looked around, dismissing me. The team moved on, talking timelines and marketing buzzwords, while my warning sank like a stone in water. After the meeting, I couldn't let it go. My code was the foundation of Aegis. Every line, every function, built by me. If it failed, it'd be on me, even if they refused to listen. So I typed up a memo detailing the vulnerability, the attack vector, the fix. I sent it to Mark and copied Mr. Davis, the CTO. I attached diagrams, code snippets, everything to make it crystal clear. I hit send and waited. No reply, not even an acknowledgement. The next day, I saw Mark in the break room, laughing with Alex over coffee. He caught my eye and grinned. "Nice essay, Kenji." "Ever think of writing sci-fi?" Alex snorted, and they walked off. I stood there, the hum of the vending machine filling the silence. My chest felt tight, like I was carrying a weight no one else could see. I'd done my part, laid it all out, left a trail they couldn't ignore. But deep down, I knew they'd never take me seriously. My accent, my name, the way I didn't play their loud, flashy game, it made me invisible, or worse, a target. I went back to my desk, staring at the lines of code on my screen. They were perfect, elegant, unbreakable. But out here, in their world, I was just a voice they didn't want to hear. The next morning, my inbox had a single email from HR. "Meeting at 10, no details, just a cold subject line." My stomach twisted as I walked into the office, the hum of chatter fading as I passed cubicles. The glass walls of the HR room felt like a cage waiting to snap shut. I sat across from Linda, the HR rep, her face blank as she shuffled papers. Mark was there, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, his jaw set like he'd already won. "Kenji, we need to talk about your fit here," Linda started, her voice clipped. "There have been concerns about your communication and teamwork." I blinked, the words hitting like a punch. "Teamwork," I said, keeping my voice even. "I built the entire Aegis framework, every line of it." Linda glanced at Mark, who stepped forward, his eyes glinting. "That's the problem, Kenji. You're causing panic with your memos, stirring up trouble instead of focusing on the team's goals." I opened my mouth to argue, but he cut me off. "Your communication's an issue. Clients need clarity, not whatever it is you're doing." His lips curled, and I knew he wasn't talking about code. The room felt smaller, the air heavy with the weight of their decision. Linda slid a termination letter across the table. "Insubordination and creating a disruptive environment," she read, her voice flat. I stared at the paper, my name in bold at the top. "This is about the memo, isn't it?" I asked, looking straight at Mark. "The one about the vulnerability you ignored?" His face didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed. "We need team players, Kenji, not lone geniuses nobody understands," he said, his voice low, final. Linda added, "Sign here, and we'll process your final paycheck." I signed, my hand steady, but inside I was burning. Not with anger, just this hollow, aching sense of betrayal. I'd poured everything into Nexus, built systems that made them millions, and they were tossing me out because of how I sounded. I grabbed my stuff, a mug, a notebook, a couple of cables, and walked out of the HR room. The office was quiet, heads down, but I felt their glances. Sarah stood by the coffee machine, her eyes wide with guilt, but she didn't say a word. Alex was at his desk, his smirk barely hidden as he typed. I wanted to shout, to make them see what they were losing, but I didn't. I just kept walking. The elevator ride down was a blur, the ding of each floor like a countdown to nothing. I stepped out into the lobby, the box in my arms heavier than it should have been. Outside, the city buzzed, cars honking, people rushing, but I felt like I was moving in slow motion. My reflection in a shop window caught my eye, a guy with tired eyes, a cheap jacket, and a life's work reduced to a cardboard box. I'd warned them, I'd given them everything, my code, my time, my pride, and they'd thrown it back in my face. Back at my apartment, I set the box on the kitchen counter and stared at it. The silence was deafening, heavier than the office ever was. I kept thinking about Mark's words, the way they'd all laughed, the way Sarah looked away. I wasn't just fired, I was erased. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. That memo, that vulnerability, it wasn't just a warning, it was a ticking clock. And when it went off, they'd realize what they'd thrown away. I didn't know when, but I knew it was coming. I just had to wait. A week after they fired me, I was still waking up to the same routine: coffee, laptop, silence. My apartment felt like a cocoon, small and safe, but empty. I'd scroll through job boards, tweaking my resume, trying to shake the weight of that last walk out of Nexus. I kept seeing Mark's smirk, Sarah's guilty eyes, the way Alex's fingers danced on his keyboard like he'd already taken my place. But I wasn't checking my email for job offers. I was waiting for something else. I knew it was coming, like a storm you smell before it hits. Across town, in that glass tower, Nexus was throwing a party. I'd seen the posts on social media, champagne flutes, confetti, hashtags about the Aegis launch. Game changer, they called it. My code, my architecture, now their victory lap. I didn't feel bitter, just numb. I'd built something bulletproof, or so they thought. But I'd also left them a map to their own downfall, that memo, buried in their inboxes, spelling out the logic bomb I'd warned them about. They'd ignored it, laughed it off. Now it was too late. It started with a news alert on my phone. Nexus Innovations hit by major system outage. I clicked the link, my pulse quickening. Servers were down, clients locked out, transactions frozen, millions in revenue evaporating by the minute. I could picture the chaos, screens flashing error codes, phones ringing off the hook, suits scrambling in that sterile office. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of my fridge the only sound in the room. A small part of me wanted to gloat, but mostly, I just felt hollow. They'd made their bed. In the Nexus boardroom, it was worse than I imagined. Sarah told me later how it went down. The party was still buzzing when the first alerts came in. Monitors went dark, one by one, like lights winking out in a blackout. Mark stood at the front, his tie loosened, barking orders at the tech team. "Fix it! Now!" he yelled, his voice cracking. Alex was hunched over his laptop, typing frantically. But his fixes were band-aids on a sinking ship. The system wasn't just crashing, it was unraveling exactly how I'd said it would. Sarah was the one who remembered. She was in the corner, watching the panic, when it clicked. "Kenji's memo," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the shouting. She pulled it up on her laptop, the email I'd sent weeks ago, and showed it to Mr. Davis. The CTO's face went gray as he read it. My words laid it all out. The vulnerability, the attack vector, the fix. They'd ignored it because it came from me, the guy with the wrong voice. Now their empire was crumbling, and my memo was the only lifeline they had. Davis slammed his fist on the table. "How did we miss this?" he demanded. Mark stammered, his usual swagger gone. "It was just, Kenji's stuff is hard to follow," he said. But the excuse sounded pathetic even to him. Sarah spoke up, her voice shaking. "Kenji warned us. He told us exactly what could happen." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a bomb about to drop. Davis turned to Mark, his eyes cold. "You saw this memo. Why didn't you act?" Mark had no answer, just a sheen of sweat on his forehead. They realized it then. Aegis was my creation, a black box only I understood. The logic bomb wasn't just a flaw, it was a puzzle, one I designed and only I could solve. Every second they stalled, the company bled money. Clients were calling, threatening lawsuits. The stock price was tanking. Davis grabbed his phone and barked at Mark, "Find Kenji." Now Mark's hands shook as he scrolled through his contacts, his fingers fumbling like he'd forgotten how to use a phone. Back in my apartment, I sipped my coffee, the mug warm in my hands. The news alert updated. Nexus outage enters third hour. I didn't smile. I didn't feel vindicated. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch. I'd spent years building their systems, years being mocked, sidelined, erased. Now they were drowning in the chaos I'd tried to prevent. My phone stayed quiet, but I knew it wouldn't for long. When it rang, it wouldn't be an apology. It'd be a plea. And I was ready to listen on my terms. The sun had dipped below the skyline, painting my apartment in shades of gray. I was on my second cup of coffee, the bitterness sharp on my tongue, when my phone buzzed. Mark's name lit up the screen. I let it vibrate, each pulse like a heartbeat, from that glass tower I'd left behind. I could have ignored it, let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to hear his voice crack. I picked up on the fifth ring, saying nothing, just letting the silence stretch. The quiet was my weapon now, heavier than any words I could have thrown at him. "Kenji?" Mark's voice was tight, like he was trying to swallow his pride, but it was stuck in his throat. We need your help." I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under me. I pictured him in that boardroom, surrounded by blinking monitors, sweaty suits, and the weight of $1 million disaster. Help with what? I asked, my tone flat, giving him nothing. He cleared his throat, and I heard papers rustling like he was clutching my memo for dear life. The system's down. Aegis. It's what you warned us about. The vulnerability. I didn't say anything. I wanted him to keep going, to dig himself deeper. He did. Look, I know things didn't end well, but we're in trouble. The clients are freaking out. Davis is losing it. We need you to fix this. His words were rushed, tripping over each other, nothing like the smooth, cocky tone he'd used to mock me. I could hear voices in the background, shouts, phones ringing, the chaos I'd seen coming. Still, I stayed quiet, letting the seconds pile up like bricks between us. Kenji, come on, he said, a hint of desperation creeping in. I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have. We should have listened. Just tell us what to do. Sorry. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like he'd never said it before. I closed my eyes, remembering the conference room, his smirk, the way he'd called my accent a liability. I remembered the snickers, the way Sarah looked away, the weight of that cardboard box in my arms. My silence wasn't just revenge, it was every moment they'd made me feel small, now turned back on them. I opened my eyes, staring at the city lights flickering outside my window. You're asking me to fix what you broke, I said finally, my voice low, steady. You fired me for warning you. You laughed at my memo. Now you're begging? There was a pause, and I could almost see his face, red, jaw clenched, hating every second of this. It's not about me, he said, but his voice shook. It's the company. Millions are on the line. You built this thing. You're the only one who can save it. I let that sit, the truth of it sinking in. Aegis was mine, every line, every function, a maze only I could navigate. They'd thrown me out, but now they were trapped in my creation. I could have hung up, let them drown in their mess. But I didn't, not because I cared about Nexus, but because I wanted them to know what they'd lost. What's it worth to you, I asked, keeping my voice calm, like I was asking about the weather. Mark stammered. What do you mean? I leaned forward, my grip tightening on the phone. You heard me. You want my help? It's not free. What's it worth? I heard him mutter something to someone else, probably Davis. There was a muffled argument. Then he came back. Name your price, he said. The words clipped, like they hurt to say. I didn't hesitate. 7 figures. $1 million wired to my account before I touch a keyboard. And I want a letter from the board, signed by Davis, admitting you fired me for warning you about this. Read by you, Mark, on a company-wide call, live. The line went dead quiet. I could hear his breathing, shallow and quick. You're serious, he said, like he thought I was bluffing. Dead serious, I replied. You've got 1 hour to decide. Every minute you wait, your stock drops. I hung up, my heart pounding, but my hand steady. I set the phone down and walked to the window, the city sprawling below me. For the first time in weeks, I felt solid, like I was standing on ground I'd built myself. They called back in 37 minutes. I knew they would. Davis was on the line this time, his voice gruff but controlled. We'll meet your terms, he said. The money's being wired. The letter's being drafted. Just start working. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Send me remote access, I said. And Mark, I'll be listening for that call. I hung up again, the weight of their panic still echoing in my ears. I sat at my laptop, the screen glowing in the dark. I wasn't just fixing their mess, I was rewriting the story. They'd tried to erase me, but now my name was the only one that mattered. I logged into the system, my fingers hovering over the keys. The chaos was still there, error logs piling up like a digital graveyard. But I knew every corner of this code, every trap I'd warned them about. I wasn't their employee anymore. I was their lifeline, and they'd pay for it in more ways than one. The notification hit my bank app first, a 7-figure deposit, clean and final, sitting in my account like a brick dropped from the sky. I stared at the number, the glow of my phone screen cutting through the dimness of my apartment. $1 million, it wasn't just money, it was their surrender. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the last month, Mark's smirks, the Snickers, the cardboard box, lifting just a fraction. But I wasn't done. The second part of my terms was still coming, and I wasn't touching their system until I heard it. An hour later, my laptop pinged with an email from Nexus, a link to a company-wide video call. I clicked it, and there was Mark, his tie crooked, his face pale under the harsh office lights. He stood in the boardroom, the glass walls framing a crowd of tense faces, Alex, Sarah, Davis, the whole team. Mark cleared his throat, holding a piece of paper like it was burning his hands. "This is a statement from the board," he started, his voice low, unsteady. "We acknowledge that Kenji Tanaka was wrongfully terminated for raising critical concerns about the Aegis system. His expertise was ignored, and we made a mistake." He stumbled over the words, his eyes darting off screen, probably to Davis. I didn't move, didn't blink, just listened as he read every line, admitting they'd fired me for doing my job. The room behind him was dead quiet, no smirks, no whispers. Sarah's head was down, her hands clasped tight. Alex looked like he'd swallowed glass. When Mark finished, he looked up, his jaw tight, and muttered, "That's all." The call cut off. I sat there, the silence in my apartment heavier than ever, not because I felt vindicated, but because I'd forced them to say it out loud. I opened my laptop and logged into the remote access they'd sent. The system was a mess, error logs piling up, servers choking on bad data. The logic bomb I'd warned them about had done its work, unraveling their precious Aegis like a cheap sweater. My fingers moved fast, tracing the paths I'd built, finding the flaw I knew by heart. It wasn't about fixing it for them, it was about proving I could. Line by line, I patched the vulnerability, rerouted the attack, and brought the system back online. By dawn, Aegis was humming again, steady as ever. I sent Davis a one-line email. "It's done." Then I shut my laptop. The money was mine, the apology was public, but I didn't feel like celebrating. I walked to my kitchen, poured another coffee, and stood by the window. The city was waking up, headlights flashing below like tiny pulses. I kept thinking about that boardroom, Mark's voice breaking, Sarah's guilt, Alex's defeat. They'd needed me, and I'd delivered, not out of kindness, but because I wanted them to know what they'd thrown away. My code wasn't just a fix, it was a mirror, showing them their failure. Later that day, my phone buzzed again. It was Sarah, not Mark. "Kenji," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I knew you were right. And I froze. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't." She kept going. "I'm quitting. What they did to you, it's not just you, it's the whole place." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Do what you gotta do," I said finally. "And Sarah, thanks for saying it." She hung up, and I felt a knot loosen in my chest. Just a little. The letter from the board was forwarded to me later, signed by Davis and 3 others. It was formal, cold, but it said what I needed it to say. Mark was gone by the end of the week, fired, according to a news article I skimmed. I didn't care. I wasn't going back to Nexus, not for any offer. That money wasn't just a payout, it was a ticket out. I started sketching plans for my own company, something small, something mine. I wasn't invisible anymore, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel that way again. The morning light spilled through the blinds of my new office, a small space downtown with a view of the city's jagged skyline. It wasn't much, just a desk, a couple of monitors, and a coffee maker humming in the corner, but it was mine. I named the company Code Haven, a nod to the quiet order I found in programming. The $1 million from Nexus had bought me this start, a chance to build something without their glass walls or sneering faces. I stood by the window, a mug in my hand, watching the streets below pulse with life. I wasn't the guy carrying a cardboard box anymore. It took a month to get the company off the ground. I spent nights drafting plans, hiring freelancers, and sketching systems for clients who cared about results, not accents. The first big contract came faster than I expected. A cybersecurity gig for a startup that didn't blink at my name or my voice. I delivered, and word spread. My inbox started filling with inquiries, not apologies. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval anymore. I was building my own world, line by line. Sarah showed up at my door one day, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes nervous but bright. "I quit Nexus," she said, standing in the doorway. "I couldn't stay after everything." I nodded, remembering her call, her guilt, the way she'd finally spoken up. "You want a job?" I asked, half smiling. She laughed, a real laugh, and said, "Only if you promise no glass boardrooms." I hired her on the spot. She wasn't just a coder. She was someone who'd seen the truth and chosen to walk away from it. That meant something. Nexus was a fading shadow. I heard through the grapevine that they'd scrambled to rebuild their team after Mark got the boot. Alex was still there, probably clawing for a promotion, but I didn't care. Their stock had taken a hit, their clients were jittery, and Aegis was just another system now, not a game changer. My code had saved them, but it wouldn't happen again. I'd moved on, and they were stuck in their own mess. I set my mug down and looked out at the city again. The skyline felt different now. Not a cage, but a canvas. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the guy they laughed at, the one they erased. I was Kenji Tanaka, the architect, not just of systems, but of my own life. Codehaven was small, but it was growing. And every project we took on was proof that talent doesn't need a loud voice or a perfect accent. It just needs a chance to shine. Thanks for sticking with my story. It's not just about code or some office drama. It's about what happens when people try to make you feel small and you prove them wrong. I put everything into this, and knowing you listened means a lot. If this hit home for you, hit that like button. It helps more people hear stories like mine. Subscribe if you want more real talk about fighting back and building something better. I've got a question for you. Has anyone ever judged you for how you sound, where you're from, or what you look like? How'd you deal with it? Did you push through, walk away, or find your own way to flip the script? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Maybe your story will inspire someone else to keep going. Let's keep this conversation alive. Until next time, stay true to who you are.